it would take 34 years to disciple the whole world, which
crazy.
It blows my mind.
It's not the first time I've heard that stat, but I feel like I get chills every time.
I know.
That, like, we've wasted so much time as the church.
Right. And that was I got super pumped. I was like, oh, this could happen in our lifetime. But then I was also like, wait a second. It's been 2,000 years since Jesus put this model into place.
What are we doing?
Right. What are we doing? What's up, everybody? This is the WorldLink podcast. I'm Manny Fernandez. I'm the president of WorldLink, and I've got Kara Pelletier with us as well here. She works at WorldLink, and we're super excited just about this podcast. I'm super pumped that you're here, and because you're young and I'm not, and so I think this will be a fun dialogue and conversation, because this is something we're both super super interested in, and we're super passionate about. And so tell why don't you introduce a little bit about what we're going to be talking about?
Yeah, so the idea for this kind of just came as it birthed out of just like general conversations in our office. At WorldLink, we're really passionate about discipleship and multiplication. We believe that is the way that the world is going to be reached for Christ. We believe that it's a big thing that the church isn't really focusing on enough. And so just as in our day-to-day, as we talked about this at work, we were like, more people need to know about this. And I feel like a lot of people are interested in discipleship, but they don't really have the tools to really pursue it the way that Jesus did and the way that we see it pursued in Scripture.
Yeah, no, 100%. So this podcast is all about discipleship, and part of it also birthed out of some of the things that are happening around the country right now. Mm-hmm. So at the time of this recording, just a few months ago and a few weeks ago, we're hearing about revival that's breaking out on college campuses, which is awesome. I think all over the place we are always praying for revival. That's what we pray about in youth groups and in college campuses, and to see it happen, I think is exciting. But it sparked a dialogue with some people questioning if it's real and all that. What are your thoughts when you think through that and when you see that? Do you get excited? Are you skeptical? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I graduated college in spring of 23. So I was in college when the Asbury revival started, when it just became like, it blew up. It was this huge topic of conversation. It was all over the news. Every college campus was trying to replicate what was happening. And I just feel like being part of like a Christian bubble on a college campus, I feel like it was just everything everybody was talking about all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And
where did you go to college?
I went to school at Texas A&M.
Okay.
So I remember they started doing these like revival nights on campus because everybody was trying to like capture the momentum of Asbury and like translate it into their college campus. Yeah. I'm sure that this is not a unique experience. I bet many campuses had events like this, but I know it was like, I think for like a week straight, they just like went to this park on campus and they were worshiping and doing baptisms and having messages, and it was amazing. But I had some friends who were on leadership with it, and they were like, we're tired. We're running out of resources. We're running out of energy. We don't know how to make this last. And so I think everybody gets really excited about revival. We still see these like tent revivals that churches love to put on, and it's this great thing while it lasts. But I think that everybody is just kind of waiting for the hammer to drop and wondering when it's going to end. And that's the part that's kind of sad about it, is that we view it as this thing that has a timeline and a deadline on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it might be important, just as we talk about revival, to define it. And revival isn't a start of something new. You have, literally, you've got the RE there. So it's actually going back to, and going back to life, going back to what gave us life. And so when we're talking about revival, we're not talking about a new movement beginning necessarily. We're talking about going back to an old movement.
Yeah.
And that's
We've
kind of...
seen it so many times in church
Right.
history.
Right, that it goes back. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's happened in different parts of church history. But ultimately, what really started it all was Jesus and his launch of the church. And that's for us is the crux of it. For me also, as we've been starting, I know I've kind of been pounding this drum for a while, but my dad showed me a video. I think it was Mission Frontiers is the one who created that video. Global Frontier, yeah. So it was a video that was passed to us, which basically applied the compound effect of a penny doubled every day to missions, and it makes the point in this video. We can source it below in our podcast, but it makes the argument that global evangelism will not reach, statistically and mathematically, it's impossible for global evangelism to reach, or for mass evangelism to reach the nations in our lifetime. And it actually calculates out that it would take 1,095 years of filling a stadium with 100,000 people and sharing the gospel, and you see generally 20% respond. And if you did that every day, it would take you 1,095 years to convert the entire 8 billion population of this planet. But by comparison, or by contrast, if I committed to discipling one person a year, and then the disciple I make in year one disciples someone else, and etc., and every subsequent disciple is committing to disciple one person a year, it would take 34 years to disciple the whole world, which
crazy.
It blows my mind.
It's not the first time I've heard that stat, but I feel like I get chills every time.
I know.
That, like, we've wasted so much time as the church.
Right. And that was I got super pumped. I was like, oh, this could happen in our lifetime. But then I was also like, wait a second. It's been 2,000 years since Jesus put this model into place.
What are we doing?
Right. What are we doing? And it's a sobering thing. I'm like, man, we really need to get out after, which is why we're doing this. We want to talk about it, and we feel like revival, there's not a good understanding of revival. What kind of thoughts come to your mind about revival and discipleship? What do you think would help to ensure that it continues on?
Yeah, so revival on its own, I feel like, I think everybody can agree it's a really exciting thing.
Yeah.
Like, it catches your attention, it catches your emotions, it feels like, to me, this replication of like a camp high that you get after you go to like youth camp, or even like kids camp. You come home and you're just like on fire for the Lord, but it takes a few weeks and then it just kind of fizzles out most of the time. And so I think everybody's question with revival is, like you said, how do we make it last? Right. How do we ensure that it stays? I think something that's super interesting too is the amount of skepticism that surrounds revivals. And I think that is because so often we see them fizzle out. But I'm curious, like, I was on a college campus whenever the Asbury revival started. And so I think that there wasn't a lot of skepticism because we were like young people supporting other young people seeing this revival. What do you feel like from an outside perspective? Do you feel like a lot of people were skeptical towards it? Do you feel like people were excited?
I've heard, I don't know, I've seen over the years just different movements that start and fizzle. And I'm kind of, there's a couple of things I think about. So when I think about this, you're talking about this camp high, and revival in general is an exciting concept. People are coming to Christ, and people are leading other people to Christ, and people are going deep in their faith, and there's prayer meetings that are lasting hours long or days, and these, people are meeting with God, and it's exciting, and it makes me think this is not something new. This is what Acts 2, when the church was launched, this is exactly what they were experiencing. Everybody was super excited, and every day more and more people were trusting Christ, and it wasn't an emotional experience. It was a genuine, weighty experience where the Bible was being taught, where people were listening to the teachings of Christ, even though, through the disciples. And, people were selling land and property to meet the needs of it was just super compelling. And
maybe that's why our hearts feel so stirred towards it, is because we're experiencing the church as the Lord intended it.
Yeah, 100%. I think, however, I do think, though, we do need to scrutinize sometimes. And I want to be careful with this, because sometimes we're just skeptical whenever we see something like that. We're just like, well, that can't be the move of God.
Crazy college kids.
Right, or something like that. Yeah. But I think it's important for us to look at, and I think, there were 4 main characteristics of discipleship back in Acts 2. You had prayer, you had studying the word, you had breaking bread and fellowship that were a part of everything they were doing, and that moved things forward. And so I think it's important for us to not just be skeptical for the sake of being skeptical.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for us to look at these things. And, in Acts also, a little bit later, I think it's Gamaliel who, when the Pharisees are examining this movement of the church, and a lot of Pharisees are wanting to shut it down, and Gamaliel is like, listen, if this is of God, we're not going to be able to stop it. If it's of man, it's going to fizzle. And that's something else that we can look through and all that. Do you think that's as a college student, when you were looking at these things, do you think this was a move of God, or what did you experience through that, or what did you feel that you saw?
I was thinking about this the other day, and I feel like you said with the scrutiny, you have to be kind of careful with it. I think it is something that, day to day, I feel as if I can fall on one side or the other of the line. Yeah. I do think that the Lord is stirring hearts.
Yeah.
And I do think that there's a move of Him. I think that there's almost like a laziness of what to do with it after. Yeah. And that's why we're talking about discipleship is so important.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about it even with just culture today. We see these revivals, but then we also see big name celebrities who all of a sudden they encounter the Lord and their whole life flips around. You think of Justin Bieber and you think of Kanye West, where all of a sudden their music changes and they're just preaching the Lord's name, and so many people are like, is that a heart change? I don't know. You might just be doing it for the fame of it. And I was thinking about Philippians. Paul talks about false motives for teaching.
Yeah.
And he's talking about, some people are teaching from the heart. Some people are teaching just because they want that fame. They want recognition. But he says, either way, the Lord's name is being proclaimed.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I rejoice.
Yeah.
That I think it's worth it, because even if the motives behind it aren't pure, I know that people are hearing the name of Christ. And I think we do have to be skeptical to a certain extent and look for the fruit, but I do think that we should also, with these huge revivals, be rejoicing because the name of Christ is being proclaimed and people are hearing His name who maybe haven't heard it before.
Yeah, and that's such a key thing with missions. We're a mission organization, a World Link, and we want for people to know God and to make Him known, and we want for people to know God and to glorify Him. And the only way that people are going to glorify God is if they know Him. And so I think it's important for us. That's what we do what we do. We're training leaders all over the world to go and to make disciples in their own culture and in their own language. And I think those types of things are super important for us as the church, that we don't just leave that for mission organizations, but that we're working on being more effective in strategies that will help to reach that. And that kind of brings us to this podcast. And what we want to do is figure out and talk through ways that we can make discipleship go beyond the revival moment, and that it be something that sparks movements in different parts of the world. And that to me makes me excited as we're going forward. Do you want to say anything else before we finish up this one?
think I'm good.
Yeah. The last thing I would say, I'm just thinking through this. There was a buddy of mine who is a pastor out of Atlanta, and he did his PhD work on church history. And I was talking with him because I think he had mentioned in a sermon that I heard something about revival, and I asked him, I was like, do you think we'll see revival spark again? And he said, I think we will see a big movement that does start. He said, I don't think it'll be like it was decades ago or 100 years ago when there were big tents and all that. Maybe it won't look like that. He said, I think it'll involve something more online, something more involving technology and young people that will spark. And as we look in different parts of the world, especially like in Europe, they're so far beyond, they're post-Christian, that they're almost pre-Christian. I have a buddy of mine that's like, that thinks they're almost even pre-Christian because there's no concept of the gospel. And so for them, the church is so ancient and behind them, their parents and their grandparents didn't even go to church in some case. So some of these haven't even experienced that. And so the idea that they might encounter it for the first time is super exciting. So anyway, I'm super pumped as we talk through discipleship over the next few episodes. Well, the whole podcast we'll be talking about discipleship. Yeah. We'll talk through different things. What are you excited about as we look forward?
I think I'm excited. I mean, we aren't like discipleship professionals up here. We're not like the end all be all to the solution for discipleship. It's something we're passionate about and we're excited about. But I think I'm excited just to learn more as we talk about it. I mean, I'm not here to be like
the expert,
the knowledge on the source. So yeah, I'm just excited to dive in more and to be able to learn more about it too.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for joining. We will see you on the next episode where we talk about how we make disciple or how we make revival last beyond the moment through discipleship. See you next time.